Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. It's a nice day, and then we'll see how this all goes.
Yeah. Has have you been doing a lot of these?
I usually do a couple a month. I don't like to do, once in a while I'll do more. I don't like to do too much more than that because you burn out.
Hmm.
Uh, Although, to be quite honest, I'd much rather be doing live talks, even though it doesn't, I mean, these I do, I sit here in the store. The minute it's over, I walk home, it's 20 minutes. Whereas when I do a talk in Maine or Connecticut, I get home later, but I like the personal contact if we can.
It's a little
But
more dynamic.
hopefully soon. It's getting there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping to do something this summer. We're going to have our 4th of July little event outside this year. And I'd like to do some more antique shows because we haven't done that in a while.
Yeah,
So,
well, I think they said next week they're going to decide whether the Pops will do the fireworks or not.
mhm.
So that would be interesting. I'm hoping maybe by the end of the summer that things are back, you know, feeling a little bit normal.
Yeah,
But
I think that'll.
we'll see. There definitely are more people out. Definitely, there's activity, so that's a good thing.
Oh, that's good. It feels so strange. I can't wait to be back. I haven't been in the city since March of last year. Um, but I miss it because I live
Well,
right on the commuter rail, so it was really easy to go in
yeah,
and just
my
poke
my
around.
wife and I, we've been having a Zoom dinner with a couple in New York every Sunday night for the whole time.
Wow.
And this tomorrow, we're going to get on the train, go to New York, and actually have dinner with the couple. And this is the last weekend that the trains are limiting capacity,
Hmm.
so we can basically get seats off by ourselves in the train.
Oh,
But
that's great.
with the vaccinations, and if they're as good as they say, you really don't have to worry as much. No,
Yeah.
I heard there aren't as many people signing up for this. Um, it's whatever it is. Some of these I've had lots and lots of people, some very few. It's just totally unpredictable. And it's usually
Yeah.
better to just get it done and do it. And we'll see. It's whatever it is.
Yeah, it's nice sort of goodwill publicity for everyone, and I know we have some of our book club members coming, so I'm sure they're um, you know customers, if not fans. And I moved my table to the other direction in case I ran out of things to talk about. So,
Oh, no. And I can go and a couple of things.
mhm.
I can go pretty much nonstop. But what I try to do is half an hour, 40 minutes of just sort of talking. And I really just try to tell stories, just entertain people. But when if people have questions, what I find on Zoom is the easiest is if they put them into the chat room and then you read them to me. Is that
Sure, whatever works
rather
best
than
for you.
me having to monitor the chat room or if someone has a real and they could unmute and actually ask. The problem is that most people's questions, the good ones are the ones that I can generalize. The
Hmm.
hard ones are the ones that are very good questions, but they're so specific that nobody else cares. In other words, they might be a good question. I try to do that. And then I assure everybody that if they have things they want me to appraise or look at, that I'll do it all, but it might be, email me, call me, check.
Hmm.
Uh, One of the things when you do things like this live, I can get through questions, appraisals, talking, huge numbers in 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. By Zoom, that same amount would take hours.
Yeah,
So that's one of the things. So if that's possible, if you can do that just on the questions, sort of
sure.
feed
Yeah.
them to me,
folks are pretty accustomed to it. Normally
Yeah.
we do webinars, and so people are used to writing things out.
Yeah.
So how much sort of weeding would you like me to do
Yeah,
with the questions in
it's
terms of how
whatever you
specific
want
is
to do.
too specific?
No, I would just look at it. If it looks like an interesting question that you'd say, gee, I wonder about that. Put it in. If there aren't other questions and it's a little specific, don't worry about it. I mean, I can answer and I can make a lot of it interesting, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So, no, I would just use your instinct and not worry about it. And let's hope there are questions before
Yeah,
you start worrying about what kind of questions or how many. And I'll try to end at 7 pretty promptly.
that sounds great.
I,
Yeah, and
I,
I'll try and have some, I guess, low balls in the back of my mind as I listen to you talk to get things rolling.
okay, that's fine. And like I say, I get to work very early in the morning. So when an hour, if it runs 5 minutes late because there's a specific question, that's not that big a problem, but
Mhm.
usually I'll try to cut it off uh,
That makes sense.
as soon as I can without offending anybody.
No, that makes complete sense. And I know, especially as we've been going at this for a year now, I think there is a little bit of Zoom fatigue that's
Oh,
hitting, and so I'm very cognizant of everyone's time, the speakers as well as the participants. And I know in the beginning, um, people would frequently be throwing stuff at you for hours, but the further along you get after an hour, the more you start seeing numbers drop.
well, and also too, you can just click leave meeting.
Yeah.
And go, oh, a technical problem. No, no, I would never do that. One of the interesting things though that I have found in doing these, like I did one uh, somewhere in central Massachusetts, and there was a person from Cape Town, South Africa, listening in on it.
Wow.
So I mean, and I've had people from Denver, in other words, somehow they heard about it and have nothing to do with the locale.
That's what's been really great
Town was about the fun.
recently, is just reaching new people.
Yeah, and
We started going really big last year for Patriots Day, and because the marathon wasn't happening, it got kind of crazy. So we've had a lot more unique visitors than normal, who just heard about us on the news or
yeah,
what have you, which has been nice.
well, I have one story in particular that sort of fits not 100% Lexington, but fits into the history and Patriots Day and a lot of that. So I will,
Awesome.
but I usually tell it on some of the things I've handled and touched and whatever.
And I can't wait to be back. I think they're starting the ferry up again this weekend, which I'm excited about, because I think that's the only place that you can pay $3 or $4 and get a 20-minute,
Yeah.
view of the harbor.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one of my favorite things to do, because I worked at the Constitution for a while, so I like to just ride over there and chit chat with people. And I haven't done that
I've
in a
gone
very
out on
long time.
I've gone out on the Constitution a couple of times, which was pretty special.
On the
Not
Fourth
under
of July
sail, just
cruise,
when they're
or
towed, on the turnarounds or
nice.
whatever. I've done a lot of appraisals for them. But even getting back to normal, my wife last week, well, she has a sticker that said, I voted at Fenway Park. And she has another one that says, I got vaccinated at Fenway Park. And last Sunday, someone invited us to actually go to a baseball game at Fenway Park. And we sort of felt life's getting back. Even though there weren't many people, at least we got to go to a baseball game there.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I was mildly disappointed that they closed down that vaccine center before I was eligible, but it was kind of nice just getting to go down to the Walgreens 3 blocks from my house. I have to say, I didn't have to pay any money to get there or deal with the train or anything. So,
Well, what happened was when she did it, she signed up the minute our age group was eligible, and she signed up and got Fenway Park, and we can walk there. Like a minute later, I ended up getting an appointment at Gillette Stadium because they were all gone at Fenway Park. I mean, it was interesting to go out to Gillette Stadium, but that's a 40-minute ride.
yeah, that's a hike.
But it's still, at that point, all I wanted to do was get the shot. So
I
but
imagine
then I have a
they're pretty
daughter.
orderly at the very least. They're
Yeah,
used to
I have a
dealing with
daughter.
crowds.
I have a daughter who lives in Africa, and she got shots at the embassy, but her husband's Kenyan. And they're going to try to come back here this summer so that he can get like a Johnson & Johnson, because
Oh, wow.
to get it in Kenya is almost impossible. And the only way you can get on further up the list is by bribing people. And then they'd be worried that you're actually getting the vaccine.
Yeah.
So
Wow. It was crazy enough here, just,
I know.
when when my parents were trying to do it, and it was one of those, everyone in the state, I think I saw today, we're over 4,000 or 4 million
Yeah.
first doses we hit today, which was crazy. But of course, for the, the 60 plus age group, it was there's so many more people than there were vaccines for that first couple of weeks.
Do we have anyone waiting, or?
We do have a couple of people.
Okay, good. Well,
Would you
whatever
like
it is.
to chit chat, or would you like to hold off for a couple more?
Why don't we give it like a minute or two over, just in case, and then just get started, and people, if they miss a few minutes of it, they miss a few minutes of it.
All right, I'm just gonna refresh all my emails here to make sure that no one is clamoring. It's been fascinating over the past, I don't know if it's just with this year or not, but Gmail does strange things sometimes, and it doesn't refresh your email if it isn't being used as frequently as normal. So there are times where I log on in the morning and I think, oh gee, no one wants to talk to me today. And then I'll think to look when the last time it was refreshed was, and it says, last time 45 minutes ago, an hour ago. So it can be a little crazy, especially when I'm getting receipts from people who have purchased tickets for things. All right, I think we've got the bulk of our group started here, and I'll keep checking.
And if they want to be up on video, that I actually like that. It makes me feel like I'm just not talking to a blank screen.
Great.
But
Hi,
muting is a good idea, though.
Welcome, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Hello. Hi.
Carol. Okay. So I'm going to keep monitoring our waiting room on the side. For everyone else, welcome. I think I know most of you, but for anyone who has not been to one of our programs in a while, my name is Sarah, and I'm the programs manager here at the Historical Society. Just so you know, the program is being recorded today, but we will make sure that whatever goes up on YouTube and Lex Media will be on speaker mode. So unless you're sort of actively chit-chatting, you will not be on camera as far as we can make it. A couple people in here. Hi, Corinne. All right. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping rules. We are going to be, for at least the first part of the program, trying to keep the questions to the chat box at the bottom of the screen, just to keep things rolling. And then if we have some interesting, stories at the end, we might get to do some video chatting as well. But just in terms of general book questions, as you think of them, feel free to put them down in the chat there. And then once we get started with the actual talk, I would just ask everyone to mute themselves so that we can have undivided attention to the speaker. So again, thank you for anyone who is new to joining us here in Lexington. Before we get started, I am just going to try and bring up a brief video, which will show us a little bit more about who we are here in Lexington. For anyone who hasn't visited before, our 3 historic house museums are open right now. And starting this weekend, as usual, or next weekend, excuse me, for Memorial Day, we will be open every single day for the first time in over a year. So we are extremely excited about that. And apologies for me trying to gain a little time here. Zoom does not like Windows Media Player. Alrighty. So I would just like to share very briefly a little bit more about us.
Hello, my name is Chris Kaufman, and I am the Education and Interpretation Manager at Lexington Historical Society. Lexington Historical Society is more than a historical society. We're storytellers, fact finders, educators, and community gatherers. Our historic house museums not only tell the stories of the past, but help us think about the world today and how we can shape the future. Every year, we welcome thousands of visitors to Lexington to learn about the first shots of the American Revolution. They come from around the world, around the country, and even right here in Massachusetts. In the community, we offer educational programs for both adults and children, including lectures, workshops, and summer camps. We work with local school districts to enhance their American history curricula so students can learn about history in an engaging way. Our recently completed Archives and Research Center offers state-of-the-art storage capabilities for our historical material, a new, safe workspace for volunteers and staff, as well as an inviting, spacious research library for residents, scholars, and students. We hope you can join us for one of our programs, whether it's in person or virtual, or possibly take a tour of one of our museums. We love having community members get involved with us and enjoy the history of Lexington. You can help keep local history alive by supporting our important mission and donating today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. And without further ado, I would like to hand things over to Ken Gloss, who is the owner of the Brattle Book Shop in Boston. And he is our antiquarian book master for the evening. If you haven't been to his shop, it is a lovely place to poke around. It's right off Boston Common. And they have both an indoor and an outdoor section. It is a really fun ride. So now that hopefully most of us are getting vaccinated and getting out in the world, I hope that you will visit in person as well after listening to this talk.
Thank you, Sarah. What I'll do in the talk is the talk will last for about an hour. First half hour, 40 minutes, I'll talk about old books, first editions. I'll tell some stories, anecdotes of myself, where I've been, the little bit of the history of the store. And then what I like to do, probably in the last 10 or 15 minutes, is do question and answer. Now, a lot of that we'll do by chat, and Sarah will read to me. And anything, I assure you, if you have questions, or appraisals are a lot harder to do by video than if I was doing this live. But if any of you have any questions, appraisals, whatever, when all of this is done and over, you can always email me, call me, contact me, and I will do as best I can to answer your questions if we don't get to them tonight. I guess I'll give a little bit of a background of the myself and the store. The history of the Brattle Book Shop goes back to the early 1800s. But for all practical purposes, it was going out of business in 1949. My father was getting married. My mother had $500. And with that $500, I bought half interest in the Brattle Book Shop. And we've always been in Boston. People call us regularly. They're on Brattle Street in Cambridge. Where are you? We tell them we're downtown. When my parents first bought the store, there was a little side street in what was Scully Square called Brattle Street. To make it even more confusing, the street doesn't even exist anymore. It's where Boston City Hall Plaza is now. And we've had 7 different locations over the years, mainly due to urban renewal. And my father built the store, and his hard work, his knowledge, and he was also a bit of a character and a showman. And every time he'd move, when it was planned, he'd move the best books over to the new location, then run sales. Half price, dollar, 50-cent, quarter, dime. But last day of the sale, everything was free. And he would literally have hundreds of people line up with bags, packs, satchels, whatever, ring a big bell, the people go charging into the store, grab whatever they could grab. 5 minutes later, he'd ring the bell again. That group would leave, the next group would come in, and he gave away over 250,000 books that way. Now, the last time he did this was in 1969, and we were moving from the end of Washington Street to West Street, where we are now. And at the end of the giveaway, there were books left over. And my father was a real character and showman. If you can sort of picture this, he hired a covered wagon with a cowboy and a horse team. And on the cover of the covered wagon, it said, "Go West, book lovers, go 5 West Street, Brattle Book Shop." They filled it up with books, drove it from the end of Washington Street near Boston City Hall, up Court Street, down Tremont by the Boston Common to where West Street is, and then back down Washington Street with my father sitting in back, throwing books out the whole way. Now, the superintendent in charge of traffic at the time was a friend of his, told him he could do it all morning, but within an hour, the city was in an absolute standstill. They told him to stop. He didn't care. He'd gotten his point across. And we've been on West Street since 1969. When we first moved there, we were in a 5-story, 150-year-old wooden building, absolutely crammed full of books. In February of 1980, I got a call at 4 o'clock in the morning, the building was on fire, and it literally burnt to the ground. I mean, it was 100% gone, but we wanted to continue to keep going, not go out of business. We found a new location a few doors down, rented folding tables. People either sold, gave us, donated books. Kevin White, who was the mayor at the time, came down with a carload of books. But the main thing was continue and keep going. And over the next 4 years, we slowly but surely rebuilt the stock. 4 years after that, we bought the building we're in now, which is, again, a few doors down on West Street. And it's sort of the old Dickensian type of store. Outside stands at $1, 3 and 5, 2 floors of general used books, a 3rd floor with rare books, autographs, manuscripts, first editions, leather bindings, and so on. In that type of business, the large, old, general secondhand bookstore, especially in the inner cities, is a dying business. And it's not dying because people don't like books, buy books, read books, sell books, but particularly in the inner city, property values have gone so high, that rent has gone so high, that old bookstores, which are not the most efficiently run businesses in the world, I can assure you of that, one right after the other have been going out of business. And then in the last few years, the internet has just speeded that process along. Now, like I say, we bought our building in the early 80s, so I hope to be doing this for years to come. I have daughters who are in their early 30s. I don't think they have any plans to come into it the way I have. And I've done this all my life. My parents say my first word was book. I really don't know. Maybe it was. I'm sure they were talking about books all the time. And then I worked after school in elementary school, junior high school, summers during college. I have a degree in chemistry from the University of Massachusetts. I was going to get a doctoral degree at the University of Wisconsin, but in 1973, I needed a year off and my father's health wasn't that good. That year now has been close to 50 years, and I don't regret for a minute that I'm doing this and not in a laboratory somewhere. And one of the most fascinating parts about the business is going out to houses and estates and the people you meet. It's almost like being Jim Hawkins on Treasure Island every day, never knowing who you're going to meet, see what you're going to type of books, what are going to come in. And I'll relate a few of those stories to you and talk about some other things. One of the things is it isn't always the customers or the people we go out to that are interesting. Sometimes it's the people who work for us. I remember one employee in particular. This was when I first started working, so it's a long time ago. And he had been working at the store for about a week, maybe a week and a half. And an older man came in. Now, that older man might have been younger than I am now, but he was an older man. And he asked for an author called Doniford Yates, a relatively obscure novelist. I knew who Doniford Yates was. We went to the section, looked for the books. We didn't have any. I said to the man, do you want to leave your name? He said, no, I'll just check another time. He leaves. My new employee comes up to me. He says, does that man come in here often? And I said, you know, I really wasn't paying that close attention, but no, I don't know. He says, oh, well, that was J.D. Salinger. I used to date his daughter. And so you never know what you're going to get. And this employee one time had one of the most memorable introductions that I've ever had. We had a month after that, we had 4 tickets to a Celtics game. And I said to him, Hugh, do you want to go? My wife and I are going, we have 2 extra tickets. He said, yeah, I'd like to go. Give me the tickets. I'll meet you there. Yeah, I'll bring someone. My wife and I get there. He's sitting there with a young woman. We get there. He goes, oh, I'd like you to meet my wife, Mickey. We're getting divorced tomorrow. What do you say to an introduction like that? But in any case, so sometimes it's the people and the places, but it's also going out to the houses and the characters. Again, never knowing what you're going to see, the people you're going to meet. And I'll relate a few of those stories and then talk about some other things, talk about some of the things that I've gotten to touch and handle over the years. We one time got a call from a lady, and she was very vague about her name and who she was, but she mentioned a few interesting books. And she lived close by. My father was still alive at the time. Now, he died over 35 years ago, but he was alive. She lived in Sharon, so we figured we'd go to her house. We got to the house. It was a little ranch house. Paint was peeling. Weeds were growing. You sort of say to yourself, what's going to be here? She opened the door. Again, she was quite elderly. We walk in, and there were just gorgeous antiques everywhere. I mean, really, really beautiful antiques. She gets to talking. She was originally from the Boston area, but she had married the Prince of the Ukraine, the cousin of the Tsar of Russia. He had escaped just before the revolution, and she told story after story about being Russian nobility in Europe and all the court intrigues and all the goings on, and how T.E. Shaw used to stay at their house all the time, how she didn't think he accidentally died on a motorcycle, but there was a lot more to it. T.E. Shaw, of course, was Lawrence of Arabia. Turned out her books were lousy, but the stories were absolutely wonderful. And when we first got in, I looked at one of her walls and she had 10 watercolors. They were sort of pastoral European scenes. I thought they were nice. And the more she talked and the more I looked at them, the nicer I thought they were. And I finally said to her, well, those 10 watercolors, they're really nice. And she sort of turned around very matter-of-factly, said, oh, yes, they're all Turners. So she had 10 original Turner watercolors, probably $1 million worth of paintings. So you never know what you're going to see or the people. Another time, I go out on estates almost every day. And when I get back, a lot of times there were phone calls to return. And I got back, and again, a while ago, and there was a message that a Mrs. Fisher had called. And she had some books. I called her up and she said, oh, yes, my father died in Providence. He has 500 art reference books. We want to get the best price we can. We're inviting a number of dealers down to bid on them. Would you be interested? 500 art reference books sounds like a good library. Providence is only an hour away. We go all over the Northeast, all over New England. So an hour is nothing. They lived in an old street called Benefit Street up near Brown University. Got to the house, it was a large old colonial house, got led through the house into a courtyard, into a garage. Second floor of the garage, there were 5,000 books. Well, it turned out her married name was Fisher. Her father's name was John Nicholas Brown. Family founded Brown University, one of the wealthiest families in the country. And after 8 months, I bought about 90% of the books I wanted. She was pleased, I was happy. She said, my mother has a lot of books. Most are being given to the university, some are being sold at auction, but would you like to go to Newport to take a look at the books there? Their house in Newport is one of the mansions on the ocean. I mentioned this to my wife. She decided to go with me on this deal. And one of the fascinating parts about it was being in one of those mansions that was still being lived in by a family. And at one point, wandering from the basement to the attic, all on my own, without a tour guide saying, come here, go here, don't do this, and so on. And it was just fascinating. Another time I got called to Newport to do an appraisal. Now, normally when I come to talks, I do hundreds of free appraisals after the talk. Again, by Zoom, it's a lot harder to do, although people can always contact me and we'll do as many as we can. But one of the things that we like to do is give out as much free information as possible, because our goal is that whenever you think of an old book, you think of me in the Brattle Book Shop. I don't care if you think of 10 others, just as long as I'm one of the 10. And one of the ways I feel I can do that is by giving out free information, as much as reasonable. In any case, this was an appraisal in Newport, and I discussed a fee. In any case, wasn't as big a mansion as Brown's. This was the Perry family, Commodore Perry, Oliver Hazard Perry. What they had was a whole stack of papers from the War of 1812. During the war, their family were privateers. Well, they're privateers if you're on our side. They're pirates if you're on the other side. It's all the way of looking at it. It was the day-to-day accountings of the ships. And it was amazing to read through. They sometimes would capture a ship and realize tens of thousands of dollars profit. In 1812, that was an incredible amount of money. Then one of the days, one of the ships got into a battle. The ship got hit. The captain got hit. He lost his leg. 3 days later, there was a tiny entry at the bottom of a page, and it said, Captain, $5 bonus, loss of leg. And that was the last you heard of the captain. So a little different nowadays. You know, when you run into a lot of characters, and I'll tell more stories about characters, but a few years ago, we went to one of our customers' 100th birthday parties. Now, when you go to a man's 100th birthday party, he tells you he just got back from Barcelona, he's going to give a talk in Florida, and he's been asked to lecture in Tokyo. And I finally said to him, wait a minute, you're 100 years old. Don't you think Tokyo is an awfully long way to go? And he said, well, when I used to work, it took me well over 25 hours to get to Chicago. He says, I don't think Tokyo is a whole lot further than that nowadays. And here's a man who can tell you about one day sitting down to dinner with Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. He was a young man at the time, and he said he was really looking forward to this dinner, all the learning and insight he was going to get from these two men. He said he was excited. He got there a little early, sat down. 5 minutes later, Ford came in and sat down next to him. 15 minutes later, Edison came in. Now, Edison was elderly, had one of those big horns for hearing, sat down opposite, and he said the first thing, Ford turned to Edison and yelled, "My Tom, you look very good." And Edison turned to Ford and yelled, "It's the Carter's little liver pills." This man said all night long, all they did was yell about Carter's little liver pills. And he said next time he wanted to learn something, he went to the library. I can tell story after story. I'll tell one more, and then I'll talk a little bit about books and things that I've handled and had fun with. We get hundreds of phone calls at the store. People wanting to know, do you have a book? Can you get a book? How hard is it to get the book? Does the book exist? Or what's the value? How much is it worth? And on and on. And most of those questions, either I or the people I work with can answer off the top of our head. Some are a little involved. Occasionally, you really have to do some research, but that's fun too. But every once in a while, you get a call that really stands out. And again, this was a while ago. I answered the phone, hello, Brattle Book Shop, can I help you? Lady, elderly, very thick Irish brogue. And the first thing she says is, President Kennedy slept with me. You have to admit that gets your attention. You stop and wait. And it turned out that she worked for the Kennedy family. And when he was 2 and 3 years old, he used to fall asleep in her arms. So he did sleep with her, but maybe not what you first think. And what she had was a whole series of handwritten letters from the president. She wanted to get an offer on them. I actually was very skeptical about that, but I thought she'd be fun to meet. Went to her house. She had, the letters were fabulous. She had great stories. It was fascinating. The letters were fabulous. I gave her what I thought was a tremendous offer on them, but much as I suspected, there was no way she could sell these letters. The letters were part of her life. I left a note behind. As far as I know, her family still has them, probably where they belong. Who knows? You know, maybe someday I'll hear about them again. And you can run into all sorts of unusual things. Right now, we're in the process of a store. Now, going to a house. Now, when people call us up and they say they have books, and the most common reason people sell books is either they're moving from the big house to the smaller house, or it's an estate, someone's died. Now, there's a million other reasons, but those are the most common. Someone called me up, said his cousin had passed on, had 500 books on mysteries and sporting. It was near Melrose or Medford, in that area. And it was sort of marginal. I said, okay, fine, I'll go. Outside a big Tudor house, the grounds were immaculate, beautifully done. Walk in the house and it was obvious the person was a hoarder. They didn't have 500 books there. They have 20,000 books there. Now, how you can get 500 to 20,000, and boy, is it a lot of work. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I'll be so happy when this pandemic is over, try moving thousands of books out of a third floor of a large house wearing a mask in hot weather. I've literally soaked through masks. I'll be so happy when this is done. But we're moving 20,000 books out of this one house. Now, one of the things that comes up, and I realize that people don't think of, obviously, but we try to screen calls. When someone calls, you know, and they have a library, the first thing we usually ask is about how many books do you have? The normal answer to that is a lot. Then the next thing we ask is, well, what kind of books do you have? And the normal answer to that is fiction and nonfiction, which is every book ever done. So we try to weed it down a little. Now, one of the things that technology has done over the years is now we tell people, take a digital picture of the shelves. I mean, even behind me, if you take good pictures, we can see what the books are. We can read the titles. One of the absolute best ways to give us a sense or an idea of what people have. But we literally go out almost every single day to houses, to and you never know what you're going to see. And I've been surprised a number of times. There was one time I got called to Drake, which is right next to Lowell up on the Merrimack River. And they just said they had some books. It sounded somewhat interesting. I get there, it's one of these post-World War II small ranch houses, nothing special. Get in, and there was a younger man there, and he was showing me some books. They were nice enough. And then on his kitchen table, one of these Formica kitchen tables, is this big, huge roll of paper. Like, I don't know if any of you know what an old teletype roll looked like, but it was a big, huge teletype roll of paper. Turned out it was the original manuscript for On the Road. It was the original thing that Kerouac did at Stream of Consciousness. He put a teletype and just kept typing and typing. I got to pick it up, touch it, hold it. I unrolled it a foot or two, it was too fragile. It turned out Jack Kerouac was his uncle. And here was this manuscript that I got to touch and hold. Now, I didn't get to buy it. They sold it at auction for $2.5 million, but I got to touch it. Another time, I got called by a museum to do an appraisal. And this doesn't quite get as far as Lexington, as far as this particular document goes, but it gets real close. Museum called me. They said, we're loaning something to another museum. We need to get an insurance appraisal. Could you do it for me? And I was a member of the museum. I many times helped and said, yeah, no problem. When they told me what they needed, I said, I will do it for free, but I don't want to do it from your website. I don't want to do it from a copy. I want to see the original. So they said, sure, no problem. Go to the museum, pick it up, a 4-page handwritten account of Paul Revere's ride by Paul Revere. So I'm sitting there holding this, reading. The British told me to get off the horse or they'll shoot my head off or they'll blow my, I mean, literally he wrote this out a week after the ride, 4 pages, minute by minute, almost account of what happened. And you're sitting there and holding something like that. Now, I deal with material like this a lot. And every time you touch something of Thomas Jefferson, of George Washington, of Paul Revere, of Einstein, it still sends a chill up your spine. I mean, it's amazing these things exist and they're there. So in any case, that's one thing. Another time, and this is a bit of a story, I got called to a university, Babson College, and they wanted me to do an appraisal for some things. And I said I'd come out and look. I didn't know whether it was beyond the time I could spend. But it turns out Roger Babson was a devotee of Isaac Newton, and he collected Isaac Newton material. And actually, Babson College has Isaac Newton's study on Babson College. But I was looking through, there were letters, documents, but Isaac Newton's famous book done in the 1600s is called Principia Mathematica. It's the foundation of modern mathematics. A first edition of that in good condition is worth close to $1 million. This copy was Isaac Newton's copy with his annotations in the margins. It went from Babson College to MIT to the Huntington Library. Before the pandemic, I was out at the Huntington Library with my wife. We went to the case where that book is sitting, and I'm going, I touched that, I held that. It's still amazing what you get. And one of the things that people ask me every once in a while, they ask me, what are some of the other things, or do you collect books? And I like to tell people, no, I don't collect books. When I was growing up, my father would bring home 3, 4, 5 books a day. Do that for 30 or 40 years. He always meant to read a chapter, a page, something about it, but there were heaps and piles everywhere. So I read a lot. I read a lot of books about books, book collecting, history, and then I read, mysteries, John Grisham. I actually have a very good John Grisham story. I think it's a good story, but in any case, and if I have time, I'll get to that one. But I really try to read things and I bring them back to the store. My wife had a collection of about 1,000 books on jazz, and she sold it a few years ago. We had someone interested. And one of the reasons she sold it, she loved the collection, but she says, 10 years from now, a lot of people won't know who this person is or that person or that. This is time to let it go. And then we also had a collection that started off as a bit of a joke. There were a lot of books in the late 1800s, before dust jackets were widely used, that had very decorative covers. And the reason they had decorative covers was because the publisher thought if they caught your eye when you walked into the store, more likely you'd buy it. And there were people who collect those just for the decorative covers. But one time I got a book, and most of them are very cheap. I mean, but they make graphically a great collection. Anyways, I got a book. It had a picture of a toilet on the cover. And the title of the book was Flushed with Pride, The Life of Thomas Crapper. In any case, I brought it home. I showed it to my wife. She took one look at it and said, we have to put that in the bathroom. So we did. A couple of days later, I got another book, had a big eye staring out of the cover. The title was We Never Sleep. It was a history of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. but with a big eye staring at you. I said, we've got to put that in the bathroom too. Now this is a little half bathroom, so there's no shower, no steam. Next thing you know, we built bookshelves. Now there are 300 or 400 of these Victorian style decorative illustrated books in the bathroom. People walk in, they're a little taken aback, loads and loads of reading material. And one of the rules of the collection is that nothing can be valuable, because every once in a while a book falls off the shelf and you can imagine where it ends up. Other things though, too, sometimes you never know what people are going to be interested in. And normally when I go out to somebody's house, I can usually go through it very, very quickly. I mean, I look, you can tell especially on what people generally have very quickly, how valuable it is, what it is. Now, when they have every book is a rare book, that's a whole other story. But when I was going through my father's collection, when he died, and he died in 1985, it took me a long, long time, because then you have the sentimental problem. And that's probably the hardest part when people are selling books. It's not being willing to sell, it's, oh, wait a minute, Uncle so-and-so gave me that one. Or when we were in Dallas, we bought this one. Or when we went to Europe, this was a key thing, or this was one of the first books so that's the hard part. But what I remember was, I finally was getting through and talk about unusual things. There was a box in movie stills, 8x10 movie stills of old movies. They would show an actor or an actress. And my father had in a box 500 or 1,000 of them. And it was like, why did he have this? And I started looking at them. Every single movie still, somewhere in that picture was a book. The actor might have been holding a book, reading a book. There might have been a bookshelf in behind them. There might have been a book on the table. There might have been a picture, a painting on the wall, but in the painting, there was a book. So there was this collection of 500 to 1,000 movie stills, all with books. And it was just a fascinating collection that I never knew we had. And we ended up selling it to a customer who really liked it, and I regret it. I still wish I had that one thing. And you can never know what's going to turn people on or what's going to be interested. Many times people think, well, you get this rare book and that's the, some major piece of history, and that's what people love. Not always. We one time bought a collection of old cookbooks. There was about 2,000 books in the collection. It was a really fine collection of cookbooks. But there were 2 boxes in the collection of these little pamphlets and brochures, like how to mix master, how to cook Jell-O or make Jell-O, or how to bake his chocolate, how to make recipes for chocolate. Some of them are really good. They're decorative, they're fun, but we didn't have the time to deal with them. I said to one of my assistants, just put them out on the dollar table. There are some real bargains there, but we can deal with the really rare stuff. About 2 hours later, a man comes running in with one of the pamphlets, and he goes, he was beside himself. He was just so thrilled, so happy. He said, I've been looking for this for years and years and years, and it's out there on the dollar, and it's the greatest. I look at the pamphlet. The title is Coconuts and Constipation. You never, ever know what people are looking for. Couple of things that I'll sort of mention right now. First of all, if you like the stories I'm telling, I do a podcast called Brattle Cast. There are over 100 of them. I put a new one out every 2 weeks. So if you like these stories, just Google Brattle Cast or so on. It's on Apple, it's on through our website, and I just go on and on and on forever. One of the things that I will talk about a little, I hope you all watch Antiques Roadshow. I love Antiques Roadshow. I've been appraising for a number of years, and it's a lot of fun. You never know what you're going to see, who you're going to meet, the people. And the way that show works is you go to whatever location it is, up until COVID. The last year has been strange to say the least for everybody and everything. But you usually go to a venue. They don't pay us anything. They don't pay you travel. They don't pay you hotel. They don't pay you meals. It's public television. But what you do get out of it is a lot of good PR. And then usually on the day of the show, you appraise from about 7 in the morning, sometimes till 6 or 7 in the evening, nonstop. And there's no guarantee that you'll be on TV. And there are usually 3,000 to 5,000 people who come to a show. Each person brings 2 items. And and out of that, they film maybe around 100 different items of different lengths. And that's what makes up 3 hours of television. But as an appraiser, you're hoping to get on TV. You don't know you will. And of course, you've paid all this money, you've gone all the distance. And one of the great parts about it is seeing the country. I'm very lucky because my wife and I, we usually can go a little early. But why would I ever go to Fargo or Boise or Omaha? But anywhere you go in this country, I don't care where it is, or the people are wonderful, it's beautiful. Don't talk about politics and religion. And it's just amazing how beautiful this country is and how nice the people are. But in any case, you're always hoping as an appraiser that you find something, someone brings something in that's really interesting, fun, that they don't know everything there is to know about it. And a lot of people, when they watch the show, don't realize, first of all, that the appraisers aren't guaranteed to getting on. But for an appraiser, the ideal show is, it opens at 7, at 7:30, somebody comes in with something really interesting. You call a producer over, they talk with you and the person, they say, go on TV, you tape, by 8:30, you're done taping. The rest of the day is really easy. But if it's 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon and you haven't taped, it starts getting tense. In any case, there was one city, and this is something, a man comes in and he has a few things from Pope John Paul back in the 70s. And they're nice, but nothing great. But then he pulls out some photographs. Turned out he was the pilot who flew the Pope and his entourage all over the United States. And he started telling stories about the entourage and the goings on. And then there's a picture, a photograph. And I'm looking at this picture, I'm going, this is amazing. The pilot's in his pilot seat, in his uniform. The Pope is in his full vestments. Now, usually when you see the Pope like that with people, he's standing there, people are coming up to him, kneeling down, kissing his ring, very formal. No, the Pope is leaning over the pilot's chair with one leg up in the air with a pen. The pilot has his Bible. The Pope is leaning over, signing his Bible. I'm going, this is fabulous. I go to the man and I go, well, great, let me see the Bible. And he goes, I didn't bring that. And I go, can you go get it? And he goes, oh no, it's locked in a safe deposit vault. Sorry. And it's like, ugh, because that would be the perfect story, the wonderful thing. I ended up taping something later on, but it was just, it wasn't quite there. If there are some questions or people have them, if you type them in, we've got about 20 minutes, and quite honestly, anything and everything you ask me, no matter what it is, I can go off on a tangent. So it really goes from that. And then I have 1 or 2 stories that I tell at the very end, so I'll leave a little bit of time for that. But Sarah, are there a few questions? If not, I can go on and on.
Some typing going on here in the
well, I'll
in the
tell you,
windows
while the
up on the
typing's getting
screen.
done, I'll tell my John Grisham story. A few years ago, John Grisham came out with a book called Camino Island, and it was about books and so on. And so my wife, for my birthday, unbeknownst to me, was getting me a copy of the book. But about 2 or 3 days before my birthday, I started getting calls from friends and so on and saying, well, that's you. That's turned out that the idea of the book is people steal a whole bunch of books and manuscripts from Princeton University and the man's in Florida, but he has to fence them. And he's fencing them through a book dealer in Boston. The description of the book dealer in Boston is he has a 3-story building on West Street in Boston, brick building that was first run by his father over 60 or 70 years ago. He took over the business. It's a failing business going out, but he's a fence. So basically, I'm the thief. Didn't use my name, but it was Oscar Stein. But how many on West Street, how many 3-story bookstores are there in Boston where the father started it 90 years ago? And it was like, wait a minute. What's going on here? So I called a friend who knew John Grisham, and I go, do you know why I'm being, did I do something? Did I do something wrong? Does he have some? In any case, I was at an Antiques Roadshow in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I was going into a museum, and I get a call from my staff, and they go, someone called and he said, it's John Grisham. We're not sure, but anyways, he gave us the phone number. I called up and it was John Grisham. And I said, I don't like that, I was being said that I'm a thief. But what really, really bothered me is you said it was a failing business. That bothered me more than being called a thief. And he said he didn't explain where it came from, but he apologized. He also said in the next edition, he changed the street name. So fine. Then he sent a signed copy of the book and said, I owe you a dinner. It's been 2 years. I haven't gotten my dinner yet. And I'm determined, if I ever go to Charlottesville, he's going to get a knock on his door and I'm going to tell him I'm hungry. But in any case, did we get through some of the questions?
Yeah, I think we might have a couple of books to look at, but I'll start with the question parts of it. Jesse would like to know, have you ever been asked to track something down and been stumped?
Oh, all the time. Have I ever been stumped and not being able to find something? Absolutely. And because, some books, it's interesting. If you have a book that's rare, and by rare you mean expensive, that's easy because everybody pays attention to that kind of book. So although it might be an awful lot of money, I can make calls all over the world. I know who to call. I know friends. And you can almost always track it down if the people are willing to pay the price. Sometimes it's higher than they want to pay, but you can, that kind of rare book. But what the hardest kind of book is, the book that's worth nothing, but the person is looking for it. And sometimes it's, oh, I read a book when I was a child and I don't remember the name and I don't remember the title, but it's about this or that. And even if you can find it, nobody pays attention to it because it's not worth anything. So those are the type of ones that stump you the most, is the book that someone wants to find but isn't valuable. So yeah, it happens regularly. And then sometimes you do it like coconuts and constipation, it appears out of nowhere. And you never knew that anyone ever wanted to look for it in the first place. But yeah, you do get stumped. But many times what doesn't stump us that often is people have a book, they ask you, is it valuable? What's it worth? And a lot of times, even if it's a very, very rare book, my response can be to them, the people who are looking for it are even rarer than the books are because nobody cares. So that type of thing. Now, sometimes on higher priced items, I have to do some research. I have to do some looking up. Maybe I take pictures of things, but I can usually almost always get an answer. It's the one that's so obscure, so, nobody pays attention. Those are the ones that stump you.
Very interesting. All right, we'll kind of swap
Well,
ones and more general ones here. There's one, how do author autographs affect the value of the book? And is
well,
it
that's a very
feature
general
or-
question. And how do the author's autographs affect, or even signing your own name in a book? Usually when collectors are collecting a book, they want it as close and as perfect condition as it can possibly be. And if you sign your name into books, most people don't like that. If you're George Washington and you put your name in the book, I'll tell you, that's a plus. You know, if you're someone famous, yeah, that does add to the book. I one time had a textbook that was just a junky textbook. It was used at West Point, but all through the textbook, the student had done doodles. You can actually tell which lessons he was more bored at and which he was less bored at. Well, it turned out it was Dwight Eisenhower's textbook. So the fact that the student added doodles and all that added a lot of value. But normally when you go to get signatures, people ask me all the time, you know, should we just get the name? Should we get it inscribed to us? And what I tell people is on 99% of the books that you get signed by an author at one of these signings, there are going to be millions signed, because by the time they're well enough known that they're doing signings, or they don't get well known and nobody cares. And in sports collectibles, they like not having the personalization. In other words, if you have a baseball card signed to Ken and you're Sarah, well, people don't like it as much. In books, authors are known for writing. My feeling is get them to write as much as they can. If they write Lexington 2021, I spoke at the Historical Society here, you know, it was good to see you there. The more they write, the better. And since most of them are never going to be valuable, get them to write whatever they can so that when you look at that book 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15, it brings back the memories of what they are. And usually the more they write, the better it is anyway. So that's what I say. Get as much as you can. If you knew Robert Frost and he wrote his name in the book, that's a plus. If he wrote a stanza of a poem, that's even better. So usually the more they write, the better it is.
That's great. Here is a more, well, it might be a difficult one. Do you have a favorite book in your collection?
It's actually a great question. I was going to say that I was going to ask myself that question.
Okay, you can do that
near
if
the
you
end.
want.
So that gets one of the questions that I was going to bring up. In many ways, like I say, I don't collect that much. Actually, what I collect now more than anything else is I have, now nobody will really be able to see this. Well, maybe you'll be able to see it a little, but I have line after line of one-line things. Every one of those, either words or lines, is a story, and it reminds me of a story. So this is my collection of stories. And when I do talks, sometimes I could just go, oh, okay, that's a good story, I'll tell that one. Or this, but I collect them, I keep writing them down. So that's one of the things I collect. Now, like I said, we have the bathroom collection. And there are favorite things. I mean, touching that Paul Revere document. One of the times I bought a 40 volume set, 20 volumes of photographs, 20 volumes of text on called the Indian Tribes of North America. It's Curtis photographs. They're absolutely gorgeous. They show from around the end of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century, fabulous photographs. Years ago, I bought a full set of it. I got it to bring it home. My wife and I went through it one page, one photograph at a time. Usually when you see it, you go to a museum and there are 10 or 20 or 30 of them up. We got to go through all 700 of them. And it was just fabulous. I couldn't afford to keep it. Actually, now if I had the set, it would be worth more than $1 million. That's one of the things that I always remember. Another thing that I remember is just after 9/11, I went to a place in Belmont, and in the attic, they had a trunk, and in the old trunk was an envelope, and in the envelope was 10 letters of Thomas Jefferson, letters of Adams, Monroe. It was just amazing. But I used to bring home things to my daughters when they were in elementary school and and so on. And, you know, I bring home Audubons. I bring home first editions of this and that. And they'd be pretty nonplussed. Oh, yeah, it's another old book. I brought home one of the Jefferson letters. And like I said, this was just after 9/11. And Jefferson was talking about what to do about traitors and terrorists. I mean, literally, it was the War of 1812, and a lot of Americans had not wanted the United States to win the revolution, and definitely did not want them to win the War of 1812. And Jefferson looked at them as traitors and terrorists. And what he said was they should get the full protection of the law and absolutely nothing else. My daughters loved that letter with what was going on. They wanted to bring it to school for show and tell. I said, no, you can't do that. But so there were things like that that I just remember. And then again, I have my list of stories and I could go on and on with that. But my favorite book, and this answer I actually stole from a friend of mine, a colleague, a book dealer, and I heard him get asked the same question. And I said, look, I called him up and I said, when you said that, I realized that was the absolute perfect answer. And it really is my favorite book. And I said, can I steal that and use it? He said, be my guest. There is a copy of The Night Before Christmas. It's not necessarily a rare copy, but it's a very nice illustrated copy. Every Christmas Eve from when my daughters were basically just born, I have read The Night Before Christmas to them on that copy. Now, one of my daughters, when she was getting married, her husband was from Texas. She lives around here, but her husband was from Texas. So what did I do then? It was before FaceTime and all that. I recorded it on YouTube and they could watch it. But every single Christmas Eve, my other daughter lives in Nairobi now, FaceTime, whatever. That copy of The Night Before Christmas is probably my favorite book and means the most to me of almost any other book I've ever had.
That's adorable.
And I used to love reading to my children at night. One of my daughters was more visual and we did I Spy and those type of books. My other daughter, we got to the point where I was reading 300-page books to her. And she finally, when she was about 12 years old, she said, enough. I've got homework to do. But that Night Before Christmas is the most valuable book. What I'm going to do now is, since we're approaching the time, I'm going to tell one last story. And like I say, listen to my podcast, Brattlecast. If you have questions we haven't gotten to or appraisals you'd like me to do, email, send pictures, call. One of the biggest problems when you ask a person who really loves what they're doing a question, it isn't getting an answer. It's getting them to stop answering. So you're never bothering me. Any case, I'm going to tell one last story about an appraisal that I got called in to do in a church. You know, it's about old Bibles. And one of the reasons I like to finish talking about Bibles is the Bible is the oldest, is the most commonly printed book of all time. It always has been, probably always will be. People call me, we get sometimes 3 and 4 calls a week that people have 100, 200-year-old family Bibles. They want to get an offer on them, or how valuable are they? In almost all of those cases, I have to say to them, sentimentally, this might be priceless. Monetarily, maybe not so much. Now, if you have those old, big Victorian Bibles with the beautiful glass, embossed gold, they can be worth $100, $200, $300 just because they make a wonderful gift for a minister, priest, divinity student. Break one class, have one hinge go, they lose all that value. Now, the first printed book in 1456 was a Bible, the Gutenberg Bible. That would go for millions and millions of dollars, maybe even tens or hundreds of millions. A single page from the Gutenberg Bible can sell for $50,000 or $100,000. So there are Bibles that are very, very valuable. It's worth checking. Now, also, there's big old family Bibles, sometimes in the middle, beginning, end, have family histories, births, deaths, marriages. Many times the local historical society wants that information. They maybe want to copy it out, Xerox it, photograph it, maybe the title page, but they don't want the whole big old Bible. They're hard to store. But in any case, I got called to a church, an old, well over 100-year-old church in Boston. They had a huge library. Over the years, they didn't collect rare books, but over the years, they just accumulated a very large library. They wanted to know if anything was worth anything. I spent a day there. They actually had some very good books. It was a lot of fun. At the end of the day, the priest said to me, "Can you come down the basement? There are a few more books." I went down the basement, looked at a few more books. They were nice. But then there was a closet. It was almost more like a small room in the basement off in the corner. And the priest opened the door, front to back, floor to ceiling, top to bottom. It was stuffed with thousands of old Bibles. And I looked at the priest, I said, "What is this?" And he says, "Well, people hate to throw away a book. They feel it's sacrilegious to throw away a Bible. So what happens when a parishioner dies and the family doesn't want the Bible? They come and they present it to the church." And he says, "What do? We very graciously accept it. We don't want to offend anybody. Then we go downstairs, open the door, put it in with the rest of them." And he says, "And we can't drive a dumpster up to the back of the church and fill it full of Bibles. That just wouldn't be right." So I use it as an example to say that if you want to give something and donate something to a charity, ask them if they want it first. If they want it and can use it, it's great. But if all you're doing is you're really doing nobody a favor. So I'll end on that. Don't hesitate to come in, call, listen, ask questions, whatever. Like I say, I love what I do, more than happy. I get in early in the morning. Matter of fact, I usually get to work at 5:30 in the morning. My wife says I only work half a day, 12 hours. When I do these talks, I even go a little beyond that. But it's because I love what I do. I enjoy it. I plan on doing it until I absolutely can't do it. But if you have questions, don't hesitate. Pictures are great. Why don't I leave it at that? And thank you very much for listening. And hopefully, this whole COVID thing will end and I can start coming out and doing these things live and in person, sounding like maybe relatively soon. Boy, am I looking forward to that. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.
I know we had a couple of folks who were asking about some things on the side.
Well,
If they would like
if you have one or
to,
two questions, why don't you quickly do them? I'll give it a few more minutes and then
that's
I'll
no
walk
problem.
off. How's that?
I know I know the Steigerwalds have one book, but I'm curious, while you guys are chit-chatting, I can put down in the messages, what is your preferred method for folks to contact you? Because we do have a couple people who are saying, can we take a photo? Can we send you some things?
Usually the preferred method would be you could call if you know exactly what the book is. Sometimes we can do it right on the phone, but an email with a picture, and I emphasize in focus, because if it's even slightly out of focus when you try to enlarge it, it blurs. But just a picture of the book is probably the best way. If you have a number of books, one picture of the shelf, if I can read the spines, is better than separate pictures. And then I sometimes can say, well, the third book from the right, I need more information. But just the basic you can do, call, email, pictures are the best. And put a phone number in, because it's always easier to talk than it is to email back and forth. And another thing I will say, we are explicit about, we always respond to email within 2 business days. And one of the reasons I emphasize that so much is if you don't hear from us within 2 business days, it means we didn't get the email. Don't wait, call us. What's the other question?
Do you do appraisals or know someone who does for baseball cards?
I do know someone who does baseball cards. I know a few people. It depends on how rare it is. I don't, again, I can go off in tangents. I'll do one or two more questions, but I'll give you a tangent. My One of the appraisers on the Antique Show is a woman. She's does sports and sports memorabilia. We're very good friends. Although she lives in Washington, she's from Milford, so she's from the Boston area, and she does baseball cards. And when I went to Fenway Park, and the person who gave me the tickets to go with them, she was there with her mother, and we're good friends. And usually, depending on what level they are, I can give recommendations. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is you absolutely never don't have to know everything. It's impossible. Matter of fact, if you knew everything, even in my field of books, if you knew everything, it would get really boring. There's always more in learning. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know who does know and who to call. So one of the great things that's happened with the Antiques Roadshow is, gee, if you want a good expert in paintings or an expert in furniture or an expert in porcelain, I know a lot of very good people, or even within specialties in books. If I don't know the answer, I can say, oh, well, I know that so-and-so, and either I'll call them or give you the name. So baseball cards, I don't know personally, but I do know who knows them.
Great. Well, I'll put the basic information for the shop in the chat for anyone who would like to pop in. Corinne, I don't know if you're interested in sharing anything or if you just want to pop in the shop.
Well, if you, if you Google Brattle Book Shop, our website comes up, all the information is there. And
That's cute.
we can go from there. Ask, talk, we get lots of people in. And now, one of the things we're finding with the pandemic, last year our goal was not to lose too much money, and we succeeded. We didn't lose too much money. But in the last month or two, we definitely have seen a lot more people into the city, and many people who are regulars who have been coming in for years, we haven't seen. And now, as they're getting vaccinated, we're starting to see them slowly come back too. So come in, email, watch the podcast, watch Antiques Roadshow, call. And now I am going to say that I want to leave, follow up if you want, but I'm going to go home, and it's a long day, and then I've got a long day tomorrow, but I like it. Thank you all. All right.
Thank you so much for
Okay.
that.
And so thank you for having me, and maybe somewhere further down the line, we can do one live. Thanks.
That would be wonderful. People have really enjoyed that in the past.
All right. I'm going to leave now. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm just going to make sure everything is here in the side. So it should be in the chat if anyone would like to contact the Brattle. Their website is brattlebookshop.com. So thanks to everyone who is able to join us today. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll all be able to get into the shop at some point soon. Thanks, everyone.